to Keto and Crime, and I'm here with a familiar face, our good friend Brian Trippett from over at the Front Porch Conservative. Again, I have roped him into watching a horror movie / thriller, and I didn't tell him the subject matter of it. I just told him the name and the year, and I gave him the wrong year, unfortunately, but he was able to find it. But we're going to be talking about a really awesome. Brian, would you consider it a horror film, a thriller, a historical, or all the above?
Probably all of the above. I mean, I don't know that classifying it as a horror movie up front is accurate, but when you figure out what has been done at the end of the film, the effect of it is horrible. Just absolutely horrible. But not to spoil anything for the audience, we'll get into that as soon as the mistress of ceremonies here starts us down that road. So I am not going to infringe upon her show, as it's, as Dean once said to Frank, the world is your live stream, and we're all just lucky to be living in it. So, there you go. So,
well, it's a free for all over here. So,
Angie Dickinson, take it away, baby.
Well, the movie we're referring to is, of course, Conspiracy from 2001, an HBO made for their own network movie about the Wannsee Conference. And I just did a video about 3 months ago on the Wannsee Conference. It's in my Third Reich playlist. And I believe I mentioned this movie and actually used some stills from this movie during that video. But it is a dramatization with some of the greatest Shakespearean actors of our time, taking directly from the only copy of the minutes left from the Wannsee Conference and putting together their interpretation of what happened. And it's bone chilling. I put it in the category of Alfred Hitchcock because what happens isn't so terrifying until you put all the pieces together, and then you're absolutely petrified. That's how I found with a lot of Hitchcock. And so I put that in that I put this in that same category.
Agreed.
And if you're a movie buff like me, you know that the 1980s and especially 1990s and early 2000s on HBO was some of the greatest films ever produced were produced by HBO, because now they've switched to being more television series, which are good. But the movies they did in the 90s and the early 2000s were just chef's kiss.
Oh, absolutely.
And they were able to pull in Kenneth Branagh, Stanley Tucci, Colin Firth, even Loki from the Marvel Universe has a bit part in this movie as a telephone operator. A lot of people may not realize that, but he's in this movie. I mean, it is just absolutely. But Brian, before we get started, tell everybody where to find you.
Oh, well, thank you very much, dear. My name is Brian Trippett. I'm the Front Porch Conservative. My channel covers politics, culture, pop culture in some cases when I think a topic is interesting enough to get into it. You can find me on Rumble. You can find me on YouTube. I'm also on Twitter at the Front Porch C1. But if you go to the search engines on Rumble and that quaint little alternative social media platform known as YouTube, and you just type in the Front Porch Conservative, you'll find me. And if you want to subscribe to my channel, you won't hurt my feelings in the slightest. I genuinely appreciate it. And if you wouldn't mind, while you're at it, hit the bell for notifications and hit the thumbs up on anything I'm doing, because for some reason there's a gentleman named Mr. 𝗟𝗚𝗽. He looks favorably on me when you do that sort of thing. So any help you can give me to make my small little concern of a channel become a big concern is greatly appreciated.
Definitely go over and subscribe to him. I'll put all his link. I'll put his entire link tree down below, so you'll have that. And let's talk about Conspiracy. We've got to go back dark times. The Nazi occupation of most of Eastern Europe and most of Western Europe, if you really think about it. About the only country that was able to avoid being conquered was Great Britain, and Spain, and Portugal. And Spain and Portugal only avoided it because they were already a fascist government. So everyone else kind of got conquered except for the UK. But basically, the Nazis had a plan for the conquering of the entire world, including the United States. People don't realize they had a plan for dealing with the North American countries after they conquered Europe. It's just bone chilling what they were actually planning. But the Nazi Party comes to power in 1933 through not an act of democracy. We won't get into how bone chilling that is with today's events, but and they put into law something called the Nuremberg Laws, which basically blames the Jewish people for just about everything. And they also put together what would be done with the Jews to make things so unpleasant for any Jews living under German occupation, especially those in Germany proper, so terrible that they would want to leave. Their plan was to get as many of them migrated out. They didn't care where they went, just leave Germany. There was a plan to move them all to the Middle East, into what is now Israel. There was a plan to move them to the French island of Madagascar after they conquered France. None of that came to fruition. They decided, outside of making it almost impossible for a Jewish person to hold a job, hold public office, marry a non-Jew, even touch a non-Jew, including things like the Kristallnacht, which was the night that hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage was done to Jewish businesses and Jewish homes. After all of that, they decided they're not leaving fast enough. We need to exterminate them. And so on January 2nd, 1942, 15 men, both military and civilian, representatives of the SS, the regular German army, the Gestapo, the Nazi Party, and just the German civil service, got together to discuss the final solution. And it included dealing with the Jews still left in Germany, as well as those in the conquered territories of Austria, the Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic, Poland, and Russia, because they had just launched Operation Barbarossa to conquer Russia and the Soviet Union, and they held over 4 million Jews alone. So they had a whole lot of Jewish people to deal with, in addition to homosexuals, gypsies, and Slavs. It wasn't just Jews that they were after. They were after anybody that was not a Nordic Aryan German. So that's where we come to January 2nd, the Wannsee House, just outside Germany, just outside Berlin in a suburb. 15 men came together under the tutelage of Adolf Eichmann and Reinhard Heydrich, to put together a plan for using the Jews for slave labor and then systematically starving them, making them die of disease, and eventually gassing them. Brian, what'd you think?
You know, we've reviewed all kinds of movies together, and you know, the Purge series in particular, among others. And you know, one of the things I've always found whenever we do these films, especially if it's a horror film, is the descent into evil. Well, Conspiracy isn't so much a descent into evil. It's a frankly breathtaking discussion on what happens when you get to the bottom of evil.
Yeah.
Because the thing that struck me the most, and I guess it was one of the overarching themes, was all among these 15 men, there were various qualms. And the qualms are kind of interesting, because it's not so much are we doing the right thing as much as it is, are we really doing it in the best way possible? They'd all more or less agreed, okay, we need a Jewish solution. We need a permanent Jewish solution. Well, you know, we've reviewed the Purge films before. Well, this is the ultimate form of the Purge. They're like, well, we're tired of housing them. We're tired of clothing them. We're tired of them taking resources that we could otherwise be using for the war effort or for German citizens in general. Okay, we just need to get rid of this problem.
Mm-hmm.
Not theoretically get rid of it, practically get rid of it.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, the 15 men around this table, either by their silence or by their out and out affirmative response, agreed to a plan to eliminate what ultimately was 6 million individuals from this planet.
With plans to eliminate 11 million.
With plans, yeah. I mean, and that was one of the things that struck me is I forget who the German official was who literally, his grasp of mathematics was extraordinary because he's literally going through a whole list of calculations saying, okay, if you do this, you'll get this result and this result and this result. And Eichmann's over there going, no, we can do 2,500 an hour. And they're like, what? No, yeah, we can gas 2,500 Jews in an hour. And I think one of the most effective and powerful scenes in that movie to me was when Eichmann goes through the calculations. Around the table, there's this collective silence. It's like everyone is stunned. And I thought, well, maybe this is the moment when some of these men are like, wow, are we really sure this? No, what they did was they began to tap on their desks with their fists, which if you folks out there watching this, if you've never seen that done, it's a very old fashioned form of applause. Today we, put our hands together like this and that's applause. In olden time, particularly back then, you could, take the flat of your hand and just on a desk. And if you're in a legislative setting or in a conference or something like that, that's how you signal that you agree with what has been said. You just the flat tapping either with your hand or maybe with the heel of your fist. And all of them, almost to a man, were just, Eichmann's gone through this list of calculations. Yeah, we can gas 11 million Jews inside of, X amount of time. And I'm sitting there going, not a one of you finds this what it should be, which is morally repugnant.
Yeah. Not even distasteful.
Not even distasteful. Just you're just sitting there going, yeah, okay, this is how we're gonna solve our problem. And I'm like, my God. It's just but the movie itself, the movie was amazing. It's probably one of the best. I mean, I agree with you. HBO, their production quality, and Amazon's trying to catch up with them. And if Rings of Power is any evidence of where they're going, they got a long way to go. But the HBO, when it comes to making films or even now miniseries, their production quality is astounding. And how this was done, and we'll get into it more, but how it was done, it's probably one of the best films I've watched in a long time. Yeah. And I had never even heard of this film until you asked me to review it, but this was amazing to watch. It really was.
It really was. And to see Stanley Tucci, who is always a bubbly, upbeat. I mean, he was in The Devil Wears Prada,
or the lovely Bones. There's another one.
Yeah. I mean, I know he was Caesar Flickerman in The Hunger Games, but even though he was sort of evil there, it was still kind of an upbeat portrayal. He's just stone cold as Adolf Eichmann, and I have a video on Adolf Eichmann. I'll put all these videos right up there. Just stone cold administrator. Just a pencil pusher of death.
Yeah. No questioning in his soul about the rightness or the wrongness of his actions. For Eichmann, it's simply an issue of how can I do this in the most efficient manner possible to carry out the Fuhrer's directive.
And cost efficient, because remember, they have been trying to exterminate Jews and others, including the handicapped, gypsies, homosexuals, for years. They had I did a video on the Nazi nurses of the Third Reich, and they had a whole program where they were killing children that were disabled or mentally deficient or the extreme elderly, the extreme sick, by either starving them to death, injecting them with poison, or they had gas vans that drove around and they would gas these people. And then they were also trying to sterilize and systematically wipe them out by making them all infertile. And they had basically rifle brigades that would go around in some of the conquered territories like Czechoslovakia and Poland and just make these prisoners dig their own graves and then shoot them and let them all fall into it.
Well, and there was a major that was talking about, was it Prague? Yeah, it was Prague.
Yeah.
Where he's like, I've had a hand in eliminating 30,000 of these, eliminating 30,000
with the Nazi death squads.
The death squads.
And they, they found that that was very inefficient because it wasted ammunition that could be used against the Allies, and it, of course, demoralized, because not everybody that fought for Germany in World War II was SS. The SS was the upper echelons. You had the regular German army that was having to carry out a lot of this, and it didn't sit right with them, and it was having a huge mental toll on your average German soldier to have to witness that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, great example of that for folks who are watching this. Go look up the history of Erwin Rommel. Erwin Rommel was to the Germans what Robert E. Lee was to the Confederacy.
Yeah.
Rommel was one of those men who was not fighting for the Nazi cause. He was fighting for Germany. He was fighting for his homeland. And in the end, it cost him because he ran afoul of Hitler. And a lot of German soldiers were like that. They loved their country.
Well, how about all the assassination attempts against Hitler? Rommel was connected to at least 2 of those.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's when he ran, and that's when Hitler found out his involvement. That's when he ran afoul of him. And well, we never heard from General Rommel again, quite literally.
No, but his troops in Africa defended him quite a bit. I think eventually they just got to him.
Yeah.
But
oh yeah,
the Desert Fox.
Absolutely.
But and then Kenneth Branagh, one of my favorite actors in the whole world, because I'm his portrayal of Henry V, and really any Shakespearean themed performance he gives is just gold. But to see him as Heinrich, just absolutely.
Branagh to me is this era's Olivier.
Yep.
What Sir Laurence Olivier was to the latter half of the 20th century for acting and for theater, Branagh is for the last maybe call it from like maybe 1985 going forward, from like the tail end of the 20th century to the beginning of the 21st century. He is this era's Olivier. Yep, he is absolutely. Just that good, and not just as an actor, as a director. I mean, kind of as an aside, I didn't find out until recently that Branagh directed the very first Thor movie, the one that launched Chris Hemsworth into the stratosphere. And I thought, and looking back on it, I thought, I should have realized that something like a Branagh had directed this, because it's just got that kind of a touch. It has that respect for the original source material, which Branagh would do regardless of whether it's a comic book or whether we're talking about Shakespeare. He has that much respect for his audience and for the material he's trying to put on the screen, be it as an actor, as a director, that he's like, no, I'm gonna take good care with this, and we're gonna try and do this right. And that's the way Branagh approaches it.
Colin Firth was also in this.
Colin Firth
as Dr. 𝗷𝗂𝗄𝗃, who was one of the authors of the Nuremberg laws. And his main thing that he got all hyped up about is not because of what they were going to do, but the fact they were trying to alter his laws, what he had already written. It was like, how dare you?
Yeah, he gets into an interesting exchange with one of the party bosses of the Nazi party. And he says, my hatred of the Jewish people is not based upon your mindless speculations and your commentary. No, I have reasons why I hate the Jews. And I'm sitting there going, I was starting to feel sympathetic toward you, and you ruined it. And that's just it. There's not a man in that room that was in that room, or as portrayed in the film, that you really could say, I might excuse you for what happened at this conference. Because in the end, either by moral cowardice or positive affirmation, they all went along with it.
Yep.
For various and different reasons. Some of them were just administrative efficiency. I mean, the discussions that blew my mind was, okay, you're saying we have to have a solution to the Jewish problem, and then Heinrich is like, yes, we're going to purge the Jews. I was like, what you mean, get them out of the country? No, we're going to purge them. We are going to eliminate them. And everyone's like, you do realize what you're saying. I mean, that major that had participated in the death squads is like, words do mean things. You do understand what you're saying. He's like, yes. Moving on. And that's the other thing about Branagh's portrayal for me. is how much he controlled every person in the room, and he knew how to do it.
Yeah.
When he felt like he was getting opposition, I thought one of the most effective things, and I don't know who the director was of the film, but the snack breaks, the breaks
Yep.
in between the sit-down sessions were very effectively done to show what Branagh's portrayal of Heinrich, how he would crush opposition to this plan, because he came to that conference knowing full well what he wanted to do and the assent from everyone he wanted to obtain. And with German efficiency, he was not going to let anyone stand in his way.
The most telling sign is when they got to the part where they were discussing the number of Jews in each conquered territory.
Mm-hmm.
And what they were going to do, how many they were going to reserve for slave labor, and then how they were going to eliminate the rest. And even what they were going to do to Jews that had served in the German army in World War I that had won medals.
Yeah.
They weren't going to gas them, but they were going to send them to old age ghettos where they would just starve to death.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's how you treat a war hero.
Yeah. And Eichmann's, as portrayed by Stanley Tucci, Eichmann making these differentiations between full-blooded Jews, half-blooded Jews, quarter Jews, Jews by marriage, Jews by religiosity, ethnic Jews. And I'm sitting here going, my God. Just incredible.
And you notice how Heydrich shut him down by going, I'm not going to sit here and have a discussion about this Jew versus that Jew.
Yeah, Heinrich was
if they're half Jew, they're Jewish and they're going to die.
Yeah, I mean, Heinrich even shut down his, I'm not even going to call him deputy, his disciple, Eichmann, and just like, no, they're Jewish, they're going to die. I don't care if they're half, one quarter, married into Jewish family. No, they're Jewish.
And then they literally brought up, and I have no respect for any German area, any area that has married a Jew.
Yeah.
They were going to dissolve all those marriages and ship the Jewish partner off.
And again, the part that gives you an idea of how thoroughly possessed, and I use that word particularly, possessed, the German people were by Adolf Hitler's idea of a pure Aryan race, is not one man in that film questioned really the rightness of what they were doing, so much as they might have questioned the manner in which they were going about doing it. I mean, everybody at that table wanted to deal with the German problem. There might have been some people like, oh, okay, fine, we'll sterilize them. No, but
that was Colin Firth's characters.
And the other gentleman, Dr. Christensen, or but yeah, they're like,
he wanted to sterilize them all and just let them die out in a generation. But then you had some of the Nazi bigwigs, the party people, say that we don't have 50 years to wait, because they were about to inherit not only all these Jewish people and all these other people. That in these conquered territories, and they just said it straight out: we don't have enough food and supplies to supply all these people. Some of these people have to go.
Yeah. It just was mind-boggling. Not even a question of, are we doing the right thing? How can we possibly be thinking about the mass murder of this many millions of people? Just, okay, what's the most efficient way for us to carry it out? Oh, gas chambers? Okay, cool, let's do it.
Yeah.
Wow, they work that good? And holy cow.
The administrator of Poland's like, let's start with Poland because I've got a lot. Just like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a lot of vermin I got to get rid of. You guys want to gas these things and get them out of here for me? Mm-hmm. Oh, and don't worry. We'll line them up on the trains. And the one line toward the end of the movie was by Branagh's Heinrich. Gentlemen, the machinery is in place. Utilize it. Everything is there. Feed it. Feed the machinery. Let's make this happen. It's kind of like a corporate pep talk where it's like, guys, we're ready to do this. Let's rock and roll. And I'm like, oh my God, do you of course they realize what they're doing. They just don't care.
No. These truly, like you said, this is the bottom of evil. These are people that have they have dehumanized a group of people to the point that they're not human anymore. It's like getting rid, just like you said, of vermin.
Yeah, it's like getting rid of a bunch of rats, or getting rid of a bunch of cockroaches, or getting rid of or
This was
just
8 years into Nazi control of Germany. In 8
yeah.
years, they've managed to
Yeah.
dehumanize a group of people.
Yeah, there are many who have made the supposition that almost the entirety of the German people were brainwashed. I don't necessarily disagree with that assessment. There have been others who've made the assertion that Hitler was demon possessed, and a significant portion of the leadership of the Nazi Party was demon possessed. I don't necessarily disagree with that idea either. After watching this film, I can pretty much subscribe to that idea.
Well, the Nazis were pretty heavy into the occult.
Mm-hmm.
They were atheistic, but they did dabble in the occult. Like, people don't realize that one of their main targets was the Catholic and the Lutheran Church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they wanted to dismantle the church because, guess what? In that time, in a fascist government, it was a fascist communist government. I mean, even though they said they hated communists, that they seized control of the means of production, so that's communist.
Yep.
But even in that kind of government, that authoritarian kind of government, if you have people that are religious, the religion gives them something else to depend on, something else to hope in. They want people completely hopeful in nothing but the government.
And more particularly the Fuhrer, who would be the godlike figure.
Exactly.
Yeah. But the film is just, if you want a real study in what happens when evil completely consumes your soul to the point that any moral conscience is just wrung out of you, watch this film. Because if you want a really good example of what it looks like when a person reaches that state, 𝗙𝗪𝗓 is just a fantastic case study in that. It really is.
And the way they paid attention to such detail, the director of this film went to such lengths to make sure that everything was historically accurate. They even called the National German Weather Service to find out the weather on January 2nd, 1942. And she said it was a snowstorm, and so they made it snow. Even the airplane that Heydrich arrived in was was an actual German model airplane, and it was just down to the detail. The china, the food, everything was as it would have been in 1942.
Wow.
Even the cars were vintage automobiles, were vintage Mercedes-Benzes.
Yeah, it just everything about it was just so well done. Matter of fact, I'm trying to look real quick about who was the director on that film. Give me 1 second here.
I had it pulled up. Let's see.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking too, but yeah, it's just, let's see.
Frank Pearson.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm not familiar with a lot of his work, but you're absolutely right. The film is just. I'll tell the audience a little bit. There's an opening scene. It's not even really a scene. It's a set of scenes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like maybe the first 10 minutes of the film, and you see varying forms of activity. Mm-hmm. And when I say activity, it mostly has to do with the house where this conference is held. You see servants, dusting the tables. You see linen being laid out. Mm-hmm. You see crystal being brought out from storage. You see name places being written for individuals. You know something momentous is coming. You just don't know what. And then as each individual party arrives, you realize something's about to go down. But the part that's just like a conductor of an orchestra, Stanley Tucci's Eichmann is just in complete control of everything and with efficiency, moving everything from step to step to step.
Yep.
And it's truly an amazing thing to watch the way that's done. You realize something is about to happen here. You just don't have a feel for what it is until they sit down around the conference table and Brennan starts speaking.
Well, talking about Frank Pearson. The fact that he was so accurate, because his entire history, I'm looking at it, is mostly historical dramas, and Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Yeah.
He directed Have Gun Will Travel, Route 66, A Star Is Born, King of the
Oh
Gypsies,
my.
Lakota Woman, The Siege at Wounded Knee, the Truman Autobiography, Soldier's Girl, Paradise, just a lot of historical dramas. And Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which that would show the attention to detail. The same, I'm sure Alfred Hitchcock trained him in that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's just everything about that film is so well put together. And like I said, the fact that they got Stanley Tucci, Branagh, Colin Firth, and there's a number of actors around that table, very notable English actors.
Loki from the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a phone operator.
Tom Hiddleston. Yeah. Tom Hiddleston has a small role as a phone operator. This is very early in his career. And it's when you get one good actor in a film, all right, that's one thing. Two of them, yeah. You get three or more, you've probably got a really good script and a really potentially good film, because that many people of that much quality are not going to commit to doing smaller bit part roles unless they're like, oh yeah, we got something special here. I want to be a part of this.
And the fact that they were all trained stage actors and Shakespearean actors, I only think that caliber of actor, that training only those types of actors would be able to say those lines without showing any emotion.
Yeah. Well, or not so much they lacked emotion. It's just, I'm not sure that they lacked emotion so much as they were extolling efficiency.
You're right. They were the ultimate character actors. They actually became the people that they were.
These were 15 individuals, and I use the word administrator broadly. Now, they had different functions in the nation of Germany at that point. You had bureaucrats, you had lawyers, you had soldiers, you had propagandists in some cases. You had different functions. I mean, even down, I am the director of the 4-year plan. Oh, shut up. I mean, there was a very annoying individual, but
he was the party guy.
Yeah, he had a title.
Yeah.
And I mean, you had as they went around the table and introduced themselves, you got a feel for what function in the government they had. And like I say, I mean, there's any number of different characteristics that are true of any race in the world. With Germans, it's efficiency.
Yep.
It's all about efficiency and how can we do it in the most productive way possible. And to a man, it's not so much they were portraying the absence of humanity or compassion. They were emoting, if I may use that word. They were emoting German efficiency.
Yeah.
Okay, the Fuhrer has given us a problem. We have to figure out how to solve it. All right, here's the plan of how we're going to do it. Now, how do we best carry this out? And literally, like I said, there's one German official who runs through a whole series of mathematical computations. He does it in his head, no calculator, no nothing else. And I'm sitting there going, holy cow. Just amazing to watch,
And the one that showed, I think, and I don't know if they just threw that in there for because it was a dramatization, but the doctor with the blonde hair, Christensen, I believe, he's the only one that showed. We see him standing outside in the snow during one of the breaks with a tear running down his face. Was that remorse for what they were about to do? Was that just in there for dramatic effect? Because we do know that Heydrich told them to burn the minutes of these meetings as soon as they reported back to their commanders and got the wheels in motion. And we know that out of the 15 copies of the minutes that were handed out, 14 of them were destroyed. But that one person, that particular person, maybe that was showing us what was going to happen. His copy was found by the prosecutors at Nuremberg.
Yeah, and the part
he didn't destroy it.
Yeah, the part that kind of got me is and I cannot remember off the top of my head who the actor was, but I've seen him in various things over the years. He said the Fuhrer has said that we're not doing this. We're not doing a purge. Yeah, and Brannau's reply was, yes, the Fuhrer has denied it, and he will continue to deny it. Translation: that's what I'm telling the German people. That's not what we're doing, but that's what I'm going to keep on telling the German people. And that's when Christensen, or his character, just kind of very sullenly sat there and realized, oh my God, I am now a cog in a wheel that is rolling way down the road. We're past the point of this being theoretical. We're now getting into how we're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, and at the end he gave a speech. I mean, there's a scene, and maybe we're going to touch on this more particularly later, where Brannau is going around the table and saying, do I have your assent to this? And everyone was giving a small soliloquy. When it gets to Christensen, the one of the 15 who has the most moral qualms about what's happening, he gives his assent, but he gives a very, I don't want to put it, a very particular explanation as to the why. And matter of fact, he even reaches over and stops another man from speaking because he wants it on the record why he's giving his assent to this.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was very effectively done.
Yep, it was. And then, of course, and even just down to Hydric's attitude when he first walks in, he talks about how this is a beautiful house. It's going to be my home after the war. I researched it. What it was owned by a German businessman that had pissed off Heinrich at some point, and Heinrich threw him in jail and seized his property.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. It was owned by a Jew. Oh, we took it over. I don't think he protested too much. Yeah, just throughout the film, you will have these really insulting comments made of Jewish people and Jews in general, and it just gives you just a little bit of idea of the entire mentality of the men at that meeting. It's just like,
when they were talking about the country when they were going down their list of countries and territories with how many Jewish people were there, they got to Estonia, who had 0 Jews. And they made the little joke that
my opinion of Estonia has gone up considerably.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was actually in the minutes of the meeting.
Wow.
Somebody commented on the fact that Estonia had done that right.
Wow. Just remarkable. Just really remarkable. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no. And then they finally dismiss, and then we get, kind of a scroll of what happened to each person in the history of them. Most of them were tried at Nuremberg and hung or imprisoned. Some of them died in the war, but I think the most telling is Heinrich himself. He was known as the Butcher of Prague, and he was the administrator of Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic, during Nazi occupation, and he was actually assassinated by 2 Czech patriots that were trained by the British Secret Service. They attempted to shoot him. When that failed, they threw a bomb and blew his car, and he died a very painful death.
Yeah,
and good riddance to it. And that happened in 1943, just a few months after less than a year after the Wannsee Conference.
And the part that got me is when they got to the explanation of what happened to Adolf Eichmann, who was portrayed by Stanley Tucci. It says in the caption under the picture, under his image, that Eichmann took over for Heinrich and considered it his honor to finish what they had started at the Wannsee Conference. And later, if I remember the history correctly, Israeli commandos kidnapped him.
He made it to Argentina.
He made it to Argentina.
He was captured by British forces, but was able to escape and got to Argentina and lived there, working in a Mercedes-Benz plant.
Yeah,
in
for
Buenos
years.
Aires, until Mustafa, the Israeli Secret Service, found him. They drugged him, they kidnapped him, and took him back to Israel and hung him.
To stand trial for crimes against humanity. Yeah.
And they hung him.
Oh, yeah. Couldn't happen to a nicer fella.
Yeah, exactly.
Just saying.
I got to talk about Argentina. I mean, I know, you know, we have the opera about, we have the musical about Evita, how great the Perrons were. No, the Perrons were not nice people. They were Nazi sympathizers.
No.
And they actually let Nazis move to Argentina after the war and gave them sanctuary because they did not have any extradition treaties. And anytime an Israeli agent was able to get a Nazi and get them out of there, they would demand their return. So the Perrons were not nice people.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, I mean,
I'm not even sure they did all the good stuff for the Argentinian people that were told that they did.
Yeah, if you want an idea of what it was like post-World War II, go watch The Boys from Brazil, Gregory Peck, Laurence Olivier, and a very young Steve Guttenberg. Yeah, you want an idea of just what was going on? Yeah.
In South America in general?
In South America in general. Go watch that film.
Yeah.
That'll give you something to think about at night.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was true. I mean, there was one line, and I think it was one of Heydrich's deputies. And he says, my loyalty is to the chain of command. Whatever we need to do here, we'll do. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, this is the justification of a soldier versus a civilian. The civilians are justifying this on bureaucratic grounds, and the soldiers are justifying it on the grounds of my loyalty to my country and to my Fuhrer demands that I must do this. And again, there's not an ounce of question, with the exception maybe of Christensen's character. I think of all the 15 of them, he was the only one that really had any moral qualms about it. But in the end, Heinrich got to him and said, well, just remember, when this is over, we're going to get this done, and I'll remember everybody that opposed me, and we'll have this conversation again. And it just extraordinarily well acted, all the scenes in it, especially, like I said, the breaks in between the times that they're actually around the conference table. Those are very well done. Very well done.
It makes you wonder what I've often laid awake at night and thought, if I was in that situation, if I was just your average middle-class German person living in that time, what would I have done? Would I have just gone on with my life, with the war going on around me and kind of knowing, but kind of not knowing what was happening to the Jews and the Gypsies and the Slavs? And would I have turned a blind eye to it? Or would I have actually been one of the heroes that helped those people in various ways? What would I have done?
Yeah, and that's what makes, to me, looking back on it, what happened in Germany just so extraordinary, because church history, it's been a long time since I've delved into it, but Germany was the heart of the Protestant Reformation. I mean, this is the nation in which Martin Luther, tagged his 95 Theses on the Wittenberg church door and started a debate inside the Catholic Church about what it should be. And religiosity, be it Protestantism or, Catholicism, is ingrained in Germany. You don't go over there anywhere, but you do not see beautiful cathedrals, be they Catholic or Protestant. And just, that was in 1517 when Luther started the Protestant Reformation. And then fast forward 400 years, a little over 400 years. And any Christian heritage that should have been ingrained enough in the German people to make them stop the insanity that was going on in their country was gone. I think there were individuals, families that absolutely hated what Hitler was doing, but there wasn't enough of them to stop his rise to power.
And also, then it probably becomes a choice: do I help my Jewish neighbor at the expense of them maybe killing my entire family?
Yeah. Oh,
what do I do?
Yeah.
People always say, I would stand up. You don't know what you would do.
You don't know. In that moment, you don't know what you would have done. You have
Exactly.
no idea.
And the Catholic Church, even though the Nazis were trying to destroy all forms of religion, the Catholic Church had a network of Nazi sympathizers that helped a lot of the Nazi officials escape to Argentina. And that is another huge black mark on the Catholic Church.
Well, I mean, they're having that discussion around the table, and someone said, "Well, we're going to worry about the Catholic Church in this, with this plan that we're coming up with." And someone said, "I don't worry about it. The Pope doesn't like the Jews anyway." And there was a heavy criticism of the Catholic Church, especially after the Allied forces, found the concentration camps, and everybody's looking at to Rome, going, "You guys didn't know about this? You guys didn't do anything about this?" And that's been a black mark on the Catholic Church for years. What they did or did not do in Germany, in either during the rise of Hitler or up until the time of the end of the Second World War.
Yeah. And
and
a lot of people don't realize now, we know that the Russians liberated the concentration camps further east.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, it really depended on the Russian commander that rolled into the camp, how the people were treated. Yeah. Lots of times the Russians would treat the people that they rolled up on just as bad as the Nazis. Lots of stories about that. So were they really liberated or not? And then you had UK, United States, and Canada liberating the ones to the west. And I've read many biographies from World War II veterans that talk about when the Americans and the Canadians rolled up in concentration camps. They were horrified.
Yeah.
And some of them opened fire on any German soldiers that were left in the camp. They just killed them on the spot for what they had done. And they said, like, the Brits and the French, well, the French really weren't in it anymore, but they said that the British were just horrified, that by that ungentlemanly behavior. But here were Canadians and Americans killing the Nazis that were left in the concentration camps because they were so angered and horrified by what they saw.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I've heard the stories that there was one story, I think it was out of Bill O'Reilly's book, or one of them. Eisenhower, Bradley, and Patton visited one of the concentration camps. And Patton, being the loudmouth of the three, is cracking off jokes, and Eisenhower's going, "Shut up, George." After they start walking around the camps, to a man, and these are battle-hardened generals, okay? To a man, they were shocked at what they found, and it just stunned them into silence. I mean, they couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe that the Germans had done this. And it was profoundly effective upon anybody who happened into that experience. It really was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, folks, if you like a good historical drama, horror, thriller, this is a good one.
Yeah. I think the line, they get to the end of the conference, and Kenneth Branagh's character, as he's portraying Hickman, looks around the table and says, "Gentlemen, we have accomplished something." And I'm sitting here going, "Oh my God, that's what you view, what you've done? You've come up with a plan that in the end would wipe out 6 million people from this planet. And your only comment about is, we have come up with something. Good conference. Let's go." And I'm like, oh my God, just talk about a study in evil. Yeah. Just when there's nothing left in you that causes you to question the morality or the rightness or the basic decency of your actions, this is a great case study in what it looks like.
And still, it makes you wonder, if the Allies in World War I had been a little more lenient with Germany, if they had treated Germany a little bit better between the two World Wars, could they have prevented the rise of the Nazis? Because what happened was you had Germany in utter disarray, utter depression. The Great Depression hit, and then you had them having to pay these huge retribution payments to France, the United States, and the UK. And then you had the American bankers loaning them money at high interest to make these payments. So they were paying the Americans twice. It makes you wonder. And then you had hyperinflation. And then they wanted someone to blame. And they blamed the Jews. And that wasn't right. But it makes me wonder if perhaps if the United States, the UK, and France had a little more grace, could we have prevented this?
I would argue yes. And there is a difference between, at least to me, there's a difference between defeating your enemy and preventing the kind of situation that allows an enemy to rise up again and being punitive toward your defeated enemy.
It's kind of like what Abraham Lincoln did with the Confederacy.
That's exactly what I was just thinking. Had Lincoln survived, a lot of what was done vis-a-vis the radical Republicans in the Congresses that followed the end of the Civil War never would have happened. Lincoln had much more lenient plans for bringing the South back into the American fold.
Yeah.
Had we negotiated kinder terms at the Treaty of Versailles, which ultimately ended the First World War, had we negotiated kinder terms, you could probably make an argument the groundwork wouldn't be there for Hitler to rise up. Maybe in the end he still would have, but I think it would have been a whole lot harder for him to get a hold of the German people the way he did.
If times had not been so tough.
If times had not been so desperate where a wheelbarrow full of Deutschmarks can't even buy you a loaf of bread.
Exactly.
So, I mean, these are questions in the end I suppose we'll never have answered, but yeah, as far as this film is concerned, Conspiracy, and I'm sure Tracy's going to give it her grade, but to me, you really need to go watch this. This is just an extraordinarily well done film with an amazing cast and a director that genuinely cares about trying to get this right. And he hits a home run in my book. He really does.
Yeah, it's an absolute A+. 10 out of 10. It is bone chilling. It's disturbing, but it's so well. It's like a car wreck you can't look away from. Even though it's disturbing, there's just something there that catches your attention because the acting is so phenomenal.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. I mean, for my part, I'm like you. I give it an A+. The acting is great. The dialogue is fantastic. The pacing of the film is good. I mean, you would think that having a 90-minute movie revolve around a meeting at a dining room table or conference table in this case, but it was a dining room table. You would think having a 90-minute meeting revolving around a meeting of 15 men at a dining room table would not be as compelling as it was. But the acting, the dialogue, the directing just is so good. You cannot really stop watching this thing.
Yeah, it's like, I put it right up there with all the other great dialogue-driven movies, like 12 Angry Men.
Yeah. For example.
Anything by Alfred Hitchcock is dialogue-driven. Kevin Smith and Quentin Tarantino are the new masters of dialogue.
Well, the movie, I'll give you 15 Blocks. Yep. The movie that Bruce Willis did where he's taking the character of Moss, I forget what his name is. I can see his face. He's transporting him from his precinct to the courthouse. And it all revolves around a 15-block trip. That's it. 15 blocks.
And their conversation,
and the conversations they're having. This is that kind of movie. It's just that kind of movie.
Yep. So, folks, if you love World War II history like I do, go check this movie out. It is absolutely well acted. It's a beautiful piece of art about a horrible, horrible thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's really nothing there's no wasted space.
No.
There's no really wasted
dialogue. It's well paced.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were committed to their characters and they got it out there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there. I'll tease it. I'll tease it for the audience. There's a small little speech that happens around a fireplace between Branagh, 𝗠𝘂, and one other character, and they're all, Branagh plays Heinrich, 𝗠𝘂 plays Eichmann, the third one. I forget what his name is, but they're having a discussion about a story that the sympathetic character of Christensen told to Heinrich, and in their responses to the story, it's very interesting, especially Eichmann. So I'll tease you with that. That scene is fantastic.
Yep.
So yeah.
Well, all right, Brian. As always, it is a pleasure to have you. I'll put Brian's link tree down below. Go check him out over at the Front Porch Conservative if you like a well-balanced view of the news and politics. He just covered the RNC. He'll be covering the DNC when it happens.
God help me.
Next month. And so go check him out, and you know where to find me. I'll be back soon with another video.
Tracy,
next time.
Tracy, thank you for having me on here. As always, this is an absolute blast.
Oh, it's always fun. And we'll get.
Anytime you want to review one of these, you just let me know. I will gladly come on your channel.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Until next time, keep on crying.